But yeah, we're gonna read book 1. I have read it before, but this is only my second time reading it. So I kind of forgot what happened in the first part already, because there were 5 books, okay? And we're doing book 1. I want to give a warning that the clans are really hard to understand. Like, it's really hard to keep track of everybody, all the characters in the beginning. You need to power through, because by the time you get to book 2, you'll know everything. Like, it'll make perfect sense. And if you want, you can look up a character, like a family tree. That's really helpful, or like a clan tree. And I will eventually make a video explaining how everybody is related and all the clans and whatever. So we're gonna begin. That's my tea. Yeah. Oops. Okay. Chapter 1, Reincarnation. Rejoice! Wei Wuxian is dead! It hadn't been a day since the siege of the burial mound, and the news had already flown across the entire cultivation world, as if it had sprouted wings. The speed was only comparable to how fast the flames of war had spread back then, if not faster. Suddenly everyone, whether they were prominent clans or rogue cultivators, was discussing this operation of vanquishment that had been led by the 4 great clans and attended by hundreds of sects, both big and small. Fantastic, fantastic indeed! Who was the hero who killed the Yiling Patriarch? Who else could it be? Ain't it Hishidi, the little sect leader Jiang Chong? The 4 major clans fronted the attack. The Jiang clan of Yun Meng, the Jin clan of Lan Ling, the Lan clan of Gusu, and the Ni clan of Qing He. Crushing family for the greater good, they destroyed Wei Wuxian's good old lair, the burial mound. I must say, well done! Someone immediately clapped and exclaimed in agreement. That's right, well done. If it wasn't for the Jiang clan of Yun Meng, who took him in and raised him, then Wei Wuxian would have been a no-name street rat in the countryside, never mind becoming anything else. The former Jiang sect leader raised him like his own son, eh? But look at him, publicly defecting from the clan, making himself an enemy of the world. He's embarrassed the Jiang clan of Yun Meng utterly, and almost doomed them to the same fate of extermination. What do you call a traitor? Him. I can't believe Jiang Chong allowed that guy to run amok for so long. If it were me, I wouldn't have just abbed him when he first defected. I would have cleaned house. He wouldn't even have gotten the chance to do all those crazy things. What does a childhood friendship matter when facing people like him? That's not what I heard, though. Didn't Wei Ying's demonic cultivation backfire? Wei Wuxian is a courtesy name for Wei Ying. So same person, just goes by 2 different names. Didn't Wei Ying's demonic cultivation backfire, causing him to be ripped apart and devoured by the ghosts under his command? I heard he was chewed to pieces while still alive. Ha ha ha, that's what you call karma. I've wanted to say this for a long time now, but those ghost generals he raised were like a pack of unleashed mad dogs, biting people everywhere. And in the end, he got bit to death himself. Well deserved. Be that as it may, if the little Jiang sect leader hadn't been the one to plan this siege based on the Yiling Patriarch's weaknesses, then success would have been difficult to guarantee. Don't forget what Wei Wuxian had in his clutches, or how over 3,000 renowned cultivators were all completely annihilated that night. Wasn't it 5,000? 3,000, 5,000, they're all the same. 5,000 is more believable. He really is completely mad. He destroyed the Yin Tiger Tally before he died, so he gets at least some credit for that. If that evil thing was left to cause harm in the world, his sins would only deepen. The moment the Yin Tiger Tally was mentioned, there was suddenly silence, as if everyone was wary of something. A moment later, someone sighed. Man, speaking of that Wei Wuxian, he used to be a young master in an extremely affluent and distinguished cultivation sect back then. It wasn't like he had no accomplishments. He gained great success in his youth. How glorious and unbridled he was. How did he end up on this path? The subject changed and voices were raised again in heated discussion. It's obvious from this case that the path of cultivation must always follow the righteous way. The demonic path is only glorious for the moment. You think it looks so glamorous? Huh, look where that got him. Death without a corpse, a voice replied forcefully. It's not all because of the cultivation path. At the end of the day, it's still because Wei Wuxian was someone of bad character. He roused the wrath of the heavens and the grudges of men. You know what they say, what goes around comes around. The heavens are watching. After Wei Wuxian's death, judgment of his character was no longer refutable. The discussions were mostly the same, and any small voice of dissent was immediately squashed. However, gloom still firmly enveloped everyone's minds. Although the Yiling patriarch, Wei Wuxian, had died at the burial mound, the remnants of his soul couldn't be summoned. Perhaps his soul had also been ripped apart and devoured by the millions of ghosts, or perhaps it had escaped. The former would naturally be a joyous occasion for the entire world. However, the Yiling patriarch had the ability to topple the earth and move mountains and seas, at least. That was what the legend said. It would be no great task for him to resist soul summoning if he desired it. If his spirit returned in the future, if he took over a body and was reincarnated, then the cultivation world, the entire mortal world, in fact, would be cursed to face even greater vengeance, sinking into an endless storm of darkness and blood. And so, when the 120 stone beasts required to seal a mountain were set down at the peak of the burial mound, every major clan began conducting frequent soul-summoning rituals. They also strictly monitored for cases of possession, sought far and wide for abnormal occurrences, and heightened their security to the max. In the first year, all was peaceful. In the second year, all was peaceful. In the third year, all was peaceful. In the 13th year, all was still peaceful. Thus, more and more people finally came to believe that perhaps Wei Wuxian had not been that amazing after all. Maybe he really had perished. Even though he had once turned the world upside down, there had at last come a day when he was the one overturned. No one could be worshipped on the divine altar forever. Legends were merely legends. Okay, if that was confusing, that's because that's a kind of strange beginning chapter in my opinion. I'm reading the first book in MDZS. It's a Danmei. Like, such a good series. So good. Okay, chapter 2. The Intractable. Wei Wuxian had only just opened his eyes when someone kicked him. A voice thundered in his ears. "Playing dead?" Because it's in all caps. He almost coughed up blood from the kick. His head hit the ground, and with his face turned up, he thought hazily, "You got nerve daring to kick me, the patriarch." Wei Wuxian had already lost count of the number of years it had been since he last heard a live person speak, never mind such awful caterwauling. He was dizzy, and the cracked voice of a young man was rattling between his ears. "Think for a moment whose land you're living on, whose rice you're eating, and whose money you're spending. So what if I took a few things of yours? They should have been mine in the first place." Soon after, there was the clamoring noise of chests and cabinets alike being ransacked. It was a good moment before Wei Wuxian's eyes could focus. A dim ceiling came into view, as did an unfortunate-looking face with a greedy glare. That face was spraying spittle all over him. "And you dare to go tattle on me? You think I'm actually afraid of tattling? You actually think anyone in this house would take your side?" Two large men, who looked like servants, came over. "Young master, everything's smashed." "So fast?" the quacking youth questioned. "There wasn't much stuff in this broken shack anyway," the servant replied. The quacking youth was extremely pleased. He turned to Wei Wuxian, pointing so hard at the man that he was practically jabbing his finger up his nose and into his brain. Go and tell me, I dare you. Who are you playing dead?" Oh my goodness. It's hard doing this guy's voice. "Go and tell me, I dare you. Who are you playing dead for? As if anyone would actually give a crap about all this junk and waste paper. I've smashed everything. Let's see what else you've got to tattle on me with. You think you're all that because you went to just because you went to a cultivation sect for a few years? Well, didn't you get kicked out like a stray dog anyway?" Presently half dead, Wei Wuxian thought to himself, "To not pretend I've actually been dead for many years. Who was this? Where was this? When had he ever done something like forcibly possess the body of another?" After having kicked the man, ransacked the house, and spent all his temper, the quacking youth strutted out the door, along with his two servants, slamming the door behind him. He ordered in a loud voice, "Keep proper watch. Don't let him come out to embarrass people." The servants outside the door all heeded. Once the man had gone, silence settled both inside and out of the house. Wei Wuxian wanted to sit up, but his limbs would not obey him, so he laid back down and flipped over. His head continued to spin as he looked at his strange surroundings and the mess on the floor. Next to him was a copper mirror that had been tossed onto the ground, and Wei Wuxian snatched it up. A dreadfully pale face appeared in the mirror. Two large blots of red were smeared unevenly on each cheek. If he were to stick out a long and vividly red tongue, then he'd be the very picture of a hanged ghost. Wei Wuxian tossed the mirror aside, a little disgusted. He wiped his face and found his hand smeared with white powder. Unfortunately, it wasn't that this body had been born strange, but rather the penchant of the previous owner, a full-grown man with a face heavily caked in makeup and sloppily applied at that. This shocked some energy back into Wei Wuxian, who was finally able to sit up. Only then did he notice the circle of a spell array beneath him. The array was scarlet and crooked, seemingly hand-drawn using blood as the medium. It was still damp, emitting a metallic stench. There were warped and crazed spells drawn within the array that had been somewhat smudged by his body, but the remaining shapes and characters were gruesome in their evil intent. Wei Wuxian had been called by titles such as the Supreme Evil Lord, the Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation, and whatnot, for years, so naturally he was very familiar with obviously devious arrays such as these. It wasn't that he had robbed anyone of their body, he had been offered one. The nature of this sacrificial ritual was a type of curse. The caster was to harm themselves with a weapon, making cuts on their body and using their own blood to draw the array and write the spells within. They would then sit in the center of the circle and give up their mortal body to evil spirits using the annihilation of their soul as the price to summon a nefarious, malicious ghost. This was all done in order to request the fulfillment of a wish. Thus, it was the opposite of possession. Okay, I'm going to show you guys the art. Is this also going to go on YouTube? Yes. Yeah. It's going to go on YouTube, so I'll upload it later tonight. This is the art. This is Wei Wuxian waking up in the array, the sacrificial ritual array. Okay. While both were forbidden magics of ill repute, the difference was that the former was much less popular than the latter. After all, few wishes were so strongly desired as to make someone willingly sacrifice everything they had. This was why the technique had been nearly lost after centuries of disuse. The examples recorded in ancient books had only a handful of cases that were backed by reliable evidence, and every single one of them had been for revenge. Every malicious ghost summoned by the ritual had fulfilled the caster's wishes perfectly in cruel and bloody ways. Wei Wuxian refused to accept this. Since when was he categorized as a nefarious, malicious ghost? While he'd had a fairly poor reputation and died an extremely tragic death, he didn't haunt the living, for one, and he'd never sought vengeance, for two. He could swear there was not a single wandering ghost in this world who was more decent and honest than he. But the tough thing was, the sacrificial ritual followed the will of the caster, first and foremost. So it didn't matter how much he objected. He was already inside this body, which was a silent acknowledgement that both parties had formed a contract. He had to fulfill the wish of the caster, or the curse would rebound, destroying the possessor's primordial spirit and extinguishing it forever. Wei Wuxian yanked his sash loose and raised his arm to inspect them. Sure enough, both of his wrists had been slashed with a sharp tool, leaving them covered in crisscrossing lacerations. The bleeding had already stopped, but Wei Wuxian knew these were not normal injuries. If he didn't fulfill the caster's wishes, then these wounds would be unable to heal, and they would worsen the longer this dragged on. If the deadline for fulfillment was missed, then he, who had accepted this vessel, would be ripped apart in both body and soul alike. He triple-checked that there was no mistake and cried, "This is ridiculous!" mentally 10 times before finally rising to his feet with difficulty, supporting himself against the wall. This house certainly was big, but it was empty and shabby. The bedding was emitting a sour smell. Who knew how many days had gone by since it was last changed? There was a bamboo basket for trash in the corner that had been kicked over earlier, and both trash and waste paper were strewn across the floor. Wei Wuxian noticed there seemed to be ink marks on the crumpled papers, so he picked one up in passing. He opened it to take a look, and sure enough, it was covered in words. He quickly went around to collect all the balls of paper. These were probably written by the owner of this body to vent his frustrations. Some of the sentences were incoherent and disordered, but the anxiety and nervousness were abundantly clear. Wei Wuxian patiently examined each sheet, and the more he looked, the more he felt something was amiss. Through some guesswork, he figured out a few things. First, the owner of this body was named Mo Xuanyu, and this place was was called the Mo estate. Mo Xuanyu's grandfather on his mother's side was from a rich family in this area. The family wasn't large, and the man was not fated for a son. After years of trying, he still only had 2 daughters. The name of the second daughter wasn't mentioned, but either way, the eldest daughter was born of the lawful wife. Thus, they were looking for a husband to marry into their family name. Although the second daughter was exceptional in appearance, she was born of a servant, which is why the Mo family had originally planned to marry her out without giving much thought to the groom. Who would have thought she was fated for a fortuitous encounter? When she was 16, the head of a prominent clan was passing by and fell in love with her at first sight. The two made the Mo manor the site of their rendezvous, and a year later, the second daughter gave birth to a son. This was Mo Xuanyu. The inhabitants of the Mo estate would normally have held such an event in contempt, but people at the time worshipped cultivators. In the eyes of the mundane folk, cultivation clans that pursued immortality were loved by the heavens, mysterious and noble. Furthermore, that prominent clan leader would financially support this new outer family branch of his every so often. So naturally, these circumstances were special. Not only did the Mo family consider this an honor, but others were extremely envious too. However, the good days did not last. That wandering clan leader was only hungry for the novelty of fresh meat, and he was over it. After 2 years, coming to visit less and less frequently, after Mo Xuanyu turned 4, the man never appeared again. In those passing years, the Mo estate's opinion changed again. The contempt and mockery returned, now with added disdain and pity. Second Lady Mo refused to accept this, believing firmly that the prominent clan leader would not turn a blind eye to his own son. And sure enough, when Mo Xuanyu turned 14, the clan leader sent over a grand party to officially take him back. Second Lady Mo's head was held high again. Although she could not go with them, this event swept away all the grievances she had. Feeling proud and elevated, she proclaimed proudly to everyone who she saw. Oh my goodness. She proclaimed proudly to everyone she saw that her son would definitely become a leader of cultivation sects in the future, rise to the top, and bring glory to the ancestors. Thus, the people of the Mo estate changed their opinion for the 3rd time. However, Mo Xuanyu was driven out before he managed to cultivate, acclaim, and succeed his father. And, driven out in the most shameful way, Mo Xuanyu was a cut sleeve, a male homosexual, and he was so audacious as to harass his fellow peers. With this scandal exposed, and the fact that he possessed only average talent and no real achievements in cultivation, the sect had no reason to keep him. Adding frost to snow, something had upset Mo Xuanyu. When he returned home, it was as a madman. His mental state had been upended, as if he had been scared silly. Having read to this point, Wei Wuxian's brow twitched a couple times. The cut-sleeve matter aside, the man was a lunatic too. No wonder he had smeared enough powder on his face to look like a hanged ghost. No wonder no one thought it strange that there was such a large bloody spell array on the ground. Mo Xuanyu could probably smear blood all over his house from the floor tiles up the walls into the ceiling, and no one would think it weird, because everyone knew he was crazy. After Mo Xuanyu returned to his old home, he was bombarded with ridicule. This time, it seemed the situation was unsalvageable. Unable to take this blow, Second Lady Mo was choked to death by her own unappeasable outrage. At this time, Mo Xuanyu's grandfather had already passed, and the one managing the household was First Lady Mo. This Madame Mo had never been able to stand her little sister, and she scorned that sister's bastard son. She had a single son herself by the name of Mo Ziyuan. Let's see how, I gotta look up how you pronounce Ziyuan. Oh, okay, here we have a recording.
Ziyuan.
Okay, I did it. Oops. Mo Ziyuan, the one who had just ransacked Mo Xuanyu's house. When Mo Xuanyu first left with such impressive fanfare, First Lady Mo had felt they now possessed something of a family tie to that prominent cultivation sect and had hoped the cultivator envoys would bring Mo Ziyuan along with them, too. Of course, she had been rejected, or rather ignored. Duh, this wasn't like selling cabbage in the markets. Buy one, get one free. Who knew where this family got its confidence? But they all possessed a bizarre idea. They firmly believed that Mo Ziyuan had potential, that he had talent, and that if he were the one who had gone with the cultivators, then he would have been recognized for his worth for sure, unlike his failure of a cousin. Although Mo Ziyuan had been young when Mo Xuanyu left, he had been repeatedly indoctrinated to believe this nonsense without a single doubt. Thus, he caught Mo Xuanyu every other day to humiliate him, cursing him for having robbed him of his path to cultivation. Yet, he seemed enamored with the talismans, the pills, and the little spiritual devices that had been brought back from the cultivation sect, and would take them all for himself, breaking them as he willed. While Mo Xuanyu was often in the throes of madness, he knew when he was being humiliated. He tried his best to endure it time and time again, but Mo Ziyuan's behavior only worsened, practically emptying the entire house. At last, Mo Xuanyu had enough. He finally stammered a complaint to his aunt and uncle. He finally stammered a complaint to his uncle and aunt, which was why Mo Ziyuan had come knocking today, looking for trouble. The words on the paper were tiny and cramped. Wei Wuxian's eyes were sore from reading all this, and he thought to himself, what kind of hellish life was he fucking living? No wonder Mo Xuanyu had preferred to end it, offering his body to summon malicious ghosts to avenge himself. After his eyeballs started feeling better, it became his head's turn to ache. Technically, the caster of the array had to mentally recite their wish. As the evil spirit summoned, Wei Wuxian should have been able to hear the details of his request. However, this forbidden magic had probably been secretly copied off a book with missing pages. It was incomplete, and Mo Xuanyu had missed that step. Although Wei Wuxian could guess that he most likely sought vengeance against the Mo family, how exactly did he want it done? To what extent? Take back what was taken? Beat up the family? Or wipe them out entirely? It was most likely wiping out the family, eh? After all, anyone who had been in the cultivation world would know the words most often used to describe Wei Wuxian: treacherous, mad. Was there anyone who better fit the description of fiendish? Since the man had dared to summon him by name, his wish was definitely not something easily granted. Wei Wuxian said helplessly, "But you've got the wrong person." At first, he wanted to wash his face and gaze with reverence upon the dead countenance that had once belonged to its former owner. However, there was no water inside this house, not even drinking water. What's more, Wei Wuxian figured the only container around was for lavatory purposes and not for washing up. He tried pushing the door, but it was barred from the outside, probably to prevent him from running amok. There was not a single thing that could allow him the slightest bit of joy in being reincarnated. He might as well meditate for a while and get used to the new body. An entire day passed this way. When he opened his eyes once more, there was sunlight seeping into the house through the cracks of the window. Although he could get up and walk, his head was still spinning, and it didn't appear to be getting better. Wei Wuxian was puzzled. This Mo Xuanyu's cultivated spiritual power is so minuscule, it might be completely overlooked. There's no reason why I can't manipulate this body, so why is it so difficult to use? It wasn't until a strange noise sounded from his stomach that he realized it had nothing to do with spiritual power. It was simply that this body, not trained for fasting, was hungry. If he delayed seeking food any longer, he might just become the first malicious ghost in history to die of hunger immediately after being summoned. Wei Wuxian took a deep breath and raised his foot, but just as he was about to kick the door open, there was suddenly the sound of footfalls on the other side drawing near. Someone gave the door a kick, which was followed by an annoyed call, "Mealtime!" While those were the words, it didn't appear the door was going to open at all. Wei Wuxian looked down just in time to see a small bowl be heavily set down before a small slat at the bottom of the door. The servant outside then added, "Hurry up! What's the holdup? Put the bowl out when you're done." The slat was smaller than a dog flap, not large enough to allow people to go in and out, but bowls could be passed through. There were 2 dishes and 1 bowl of rice that looked awfully disgusting. Wei Wuxian bitterly stirred the chopsticks that were stabbed into the rice. The Yiling patriarch had returned to life only to be kicked down and yelled at. The first meal to welcome him back was cold leftovers. Who would believe him if he told them? What had happened to his bloody reign, his absolute massacres, his unadulterated annihilation of the sex? Truly, out of the mountains, a tiger can be bullied by a dog. In shallow waters, a dragon can be mocked by a shrimp, and a plucked phoenix is lower than a chicken. Stripped of their privileges, the strong will be belittled by the weak. Just then, the voice of the servant outside the door was heard once more, but this time it was a laugh that sounded as if it came from a completely different person. "Ah Ding, come over here." A delicate and frail feminine voice answered from a distance. "Ah Tong, did you come to deliver food for that person in there again?" Ah Tong clicked his tongue. "Why else would I come to this miserable courtyard?" Ah Ding's voice was at the door, much closer now. "You only make deliveries once a day, and no one scolds you even if you slack off every now and then, so why are you frowning at being so free? Look at me, so busy with errands that I can't even go out to play." Ah Tong complained. "It's not like delivering meals is the only thing I do, and you still dare to go out right now? There are so many walking corpses roaming about that every household has their doors firmly shut." Wei Wuxian was crouched down by the door, pushing around the contents of the bowl in his hand with 2 chopsticks of different lengths, listening as he ate. Seemed like things hadn't been peaceful here at the Mo estate. Walking corpses, as per their name, were the walking dead. Reanimated corpses that were low level and commonplace. Their eyes were usually glazed, their movements sluggish. They were fairly harmless. Nonetheless, that was enough to terrify average folks, and their putrid smell alone was enough to make one fill a pot with puke. However, to Wei Wuxian, they were the easiest to manipulate and the most obedient of puppets. In fact, it even felt somewhat endearing to suddenly hear about them. Ah Tong appeared to have winked. "You have to take me along if you want to go out so I can protect you." Ah Ding cut him off dismissively. "You protect me? Please. Can you actually fight those creatures off?" "If I can't fight them off, then no one can," Ah Tong grumbled. Ah Ding laughed. "How do you know if other people can't fight them off? Let me tell you, delegates from a cultivation sect have already arrived at our Mo Manor today. I hear they're from an incredibly prominent clan. The madam is receiving them in the main hall right this minute. Everyone in town is gathered to watch. They're all so curious. You hear that noise? They might order me around again in a bit. I don't have time to play with you." Wei Wuxian listened intently. Sure enough, there was the faint sound of commotion. After a moment's contemplation, he got up and kicked the bar, locking the door, which broke with a crack. The 2 servants, flirting with each other, screamed in surprise when the door was suddenly flung open. Wei Wuxian tossed the bowl and chopsticks aside as he stalked out, but the sunlight blinded him. The glare also caused a small, pinching pain on his skin, so he raised his hand to his brows and closed his eyes for a moment. Ah Tong had screamed louder than Ah Ding a moment ago, but when he looked closer, he realized it was that lunatic everyone could bully. His courage returned. Feeling he must regain the dignity he'd just lost, he jumped over and waved, shooing Wei Wuxian like one would a dog. He yelled, "Get out of here! Shoot! Go back in! What are you doing outside?" Not even beggars or flies could have received more unsightly treatment. This was probably how these servants had treated Mo Xuanyu in the past, and they grew ever more impertinent when he didn't retaliate. Wei Wuxian gave Ah Tong a light kick, sending him tumbling, and laughed. "Who are you trying to humiliate, huh?" With that, he headed east, following the noise. Both the east hall and the east courtyard were crowded with people, and just as Wei Wuxian stepped into the yard, he heard a woman whose voice rose louder than the others. "We have a junior at home who also had an affinity for cultivation once." That must have been Madame Mo, who was trying to build connections with the cultivation clans again. Wei Wuxian didn't bother waiting for her to finish before he languidly squeezed through the crowd, entering the main hall. He waved enthusiastically. "Here, here, over here!" In the main seat of the hall sat a middle-aged woman, well-maintained and sumptuously dressed. This was Madame Mo. The one sitting below was her husband, who had married into the family, and across from him were several white-clad youths, with swords on their backs. When a disheveled, unkempt weirdo suddenly emerged from the crowd, conversation came to an abrupt stop. However, Wei Wuxian seemed to take no notice of the frozen atmosphere. He said unabashedly, "Who called me just now? The one with an affinity for cultivation? Isn't that me?" There was too much powder on his face, and it cracked when he smiled, flaking as it fluttered off. One of the white-clad youths snorted, almost laughing out loud, but he restrained himself when another youth, who appeared to be the leader of the bunch, shot him a disapproving look. Wei Wuxian snuck a glimpse at them and was somewhat taken aback. At first he had thought an incredibly prominent clan was but the exaggerated praise of an unlearned servant. But the people here really were cultivation disciples worthy of their name. Who would have thought? Graceful sleeved and light, airily sashed, these youths were exceptionally pleasing to the eyes, transcendent and poised. Judging by their uniforms alone, it was obvious they came from the Lan clan of Gusu. They were disciples with blood ties to the Lan family as well, since every single one of them had a 2-centimeter wide white ribbon patterned with rolling clouds tied around their foreheads. Elegance and righteousness was the motto of the Lan clan of Gusu, and this forehead ribbon symbolized self-restraint. The rolling clouds were the Lan family's insignia, and guest cultivators or sect disciples of outsider families affiliated with the prominent clan were only allowed to wear ribbons without the pattern. Wei Wuxian always cringed every time he spotted someone from the Lan family. He had often complained under his breaths in his previous life that their uniforms looked like funeral clothes, so he knew he wasn't mistaken now. It had been a long time since Madame Mo had seen this nephew of hers, and it took a while before she was able to recover from her shock. After realizing who this heavily powdered person was, she was furious, but she couldn't lose her composure, so she hissed at her husband. "Who let him out? Get him out of here!" Her husband responded with an apologetic smile and got up with a glum look, ready to seize Wei Wuxian. All of a sudden, Wei Wuxian dropped down without warning and latched firmly onto the ground, immovable no matter how he was pulled or dragged. Not even the servants who were called in to help could do anything. If not for the outsiders who were present, they would have started to kick him already. Madame Mo's face was growing darker and darker, and the husband was drenched in sweat as well. He yelled, "You damn lunatic! If you don't go back right now, be careful or I'll put you in your place." Although everyone from the Mo estate knew there was a young master in the Mo family who had gone mad, Mo Xuanyu had withdrawn into that gloomy house of his for many years, afraid to see everyone. Now that they saw how both his appearance and his actions resembled those of a raging monster, they started to whisper among themselves, excited to watch this spectacle unfold. Wei Wuxian spoke up. "I can go back if you want," he pointed at Mo Ziyuan. "But you have to make him return everything he stole from me first." Mo Ziyuan never thought this lunatic would have the gall. He'd taught the guy a lesson just a day ago, only to have him turn around and expose him here today. His face changed colors as he exclaimed, "You're lying! Since when have I ever stolen anything of yours? Why would I need to steal any of your stuff?" Right, Wei Wuxian agreed. "You didn't steal, you snatched." Madame Mo could now tell that Mo Xuanyu had obviously come prepared. His mind was perfectly clear, and he was bent on humiliating them. Shocked and livid, she accused him sharply. "You fully intend to wreak havoc here today, isn't that right?" Wei Wuxian looked confused. "He stole my stuff, snatched it from me even. Is asking for it all back considered wreaking havoc?" Mo Ziyuan grew agitated, raising his leg to kick Wei Wuxian before Madame Mo could answer. However, one of the sword-carrying, white-clad youths moved his finger slightly, and Mo Ziyuan immediately lost balance. The kick brushed past Wei Wuxian, missing the mark, and the boy tripped over himself. However, Wei Wuxian still tumbled and rolled as if he really had been kicked. He even ripped open his robes, revealing on his chest the footprint left behind by Mo Ziyuan's kicks the day before. The villagers of the Mo estate were enjoying the show immensely. Excitement filled the crowd. There was no way Mo Xuanyu could have kicked himself to create that footprint, and no matter what, he was still a member of the Mo family. What a vicious household! The boy hadn't been this crazy when he first returned, so it was probably the family's doing. Either way, it wasn't like they were the ones being beaten. So long as there was a show to watch, all the better. This spectacle was truly more interesting than the arrival of the cultivators. With so many eyes watching, the youth couldn't be beaten, and he couldn't be kicked out. Madame Mo had no choice but to forcibly smooth the whole debacle over with fury thick in her throat. She said impassively, "What steal? What snatch? Such ugly accusations! We are family. It's nothing but borrowing. Yuan is your younger brother. So what if he takes a few things of yours? As an elder brother, will you be this stingy? Throwing a childish tantrum and embarrassing everyone over such a small matter? It's not like he wasn't going to return your things." The white-clad youths stared at each other in dismay, and one of them almost choked on his tea. The disciples who grew up with the Lan clan of Gusu were raised in refined elegance, so they had probably never encountered such a farce, nor heard such brilliance. Today's events were probably widening their horizons. Wei Wuxian laughed maniacally in his mind and extended his hand. Give them back, then. Of course, Mo Ziyuan couldn't return anything. All the items were long since tossed out or torn apart, and even if he could have returned them, he wouldn't have done so willingly. Red in the face, he cried out in protest. Mom, he scowled at her. Are you going to let him insult me like this? Madame Mo glowered at him, signaling him not to make the scene any worse than it was. Unexpectedly, Wei Wuxian spoke up again. While we're on the topic, not only should he not have stolen my stuff, he shouldn't have done so in the middle of the night. Everyone knows I like men, even if he has no shame. I know not to make myself suspicious. Madame Mo drew in a sharp breath and yelled, What are you spewing in front of the village folks? How shameless! Yuan is your little cousin. When it came to outrageous behavior, Wei Wuxian was an expert. In the past, he'd had to maintain some form of decorum so people couldn't accuse him of having a poor upbringing, but now he was a lunatic anyway, so what did he care for shame? He could go wild and cut loose to his heart's content. He stiffened his neck and said outright, He knew he was my little cousin, but he still didn't observe propriety and keep his distance, so who is the more shameless one here? I don't care if you don't care about your reputation, but I still care about mine. I still gotta find a good man. Mo Ziyuan roared, raising a chair to hurl it Wei Wuxian's way. Seeing that he finally snapped, Wei Wuxian quickly scrambled up to go hide. That chair broke into pieces upon impact with the ground. The spectators crowding in and out of the East Hall were waiting with unconcealed delight to watch the Mo family be disgraced, but they all quickly dispersed once things got violent, afraid they might be injured. Wei Wuxian ducked toward the youths from the Lan family, who were completely dumbfounded by what was unfolding, crying as he did so. You see, he's hitting me even though he stole my stuff. How heartless! Mo Ziyuan chased him over, ready to lunge, but the leader of the youth stopped him. This, Gongji, we can talk this out. Gongzi. Gongzi? Wait, I've heard it said, but we're gonna find out how to pronounce it. I think it's Gongza.
You are looking at Julian's pronunciation guide, where we look at how to pronounce better some of them. Do you say what you...
What in the world?
H. Je. The board. I'll see you soon.
What in the world? Gongzhe.
Gongzi.
Gongzi? I think it's Gongza. We're gonna say Gongza for now, and if it's wrong, I'll say it right next time. Okay. I just know once they say it once, they're gonna say it 10 million times. This Gongza, we can talk this out. Seeing that the youth intended to protect the lunatic, Madame Mo grew apprehensive. She forced a smile. This young man is my younger sister's son. He's a little unstable here. Everyone at the Mo estate knows he's crazy. He's always saying strange things, so don't take him seriously. Esteemed cultivators, you mustn't. Before she could finish, Wei Wuxian poked his head out from behind the youth. Who said I can't be taken seriously? From now on, if anyone tries to steal my stuff, I'm gonna chop off an arm. Every time they do, just try me. Mo Ziyuan was being held back by his father at first, but when he heard this, his anger flared up again. Wei Wuxian darted out the door like a fish, taunting him with a la 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 as he went. The youth quickly blocked the door right after and changed the topic, assuming a serious face to talk business. Then we will be borrowing your esteemed West Courtyard for tonight. Please remember exactly what I said earlier. Lock all doors and shut all windows tight after dusk. Do not come out for any activities, especially not near the West Courtyard. Madame Mo was shaking with rage, but it wouldn't have been courteous to push the youth aside despite him blocking her, so she could only reply, Yes, thank you. Mo Ziyuan was in a state of disbelief. Mom, are you gonna let that lunatic get away with slandering me in public? Didn't you say yourself that he was only a mere— Shut your mouth, Madame Mo cut him off sharply. Can you not wait until we're back inside? Mo Ziyuan had never suffered such a wrong before, nor had he ever been humiliated this way. He had especially never been scolded by his mother like this. He cried furiously, "That lunatic is dead!" After Wei Wuxian was done letting loose, he went out the main entrance of the manor and strolled around the Mo estate to show his face, scaring innumerous passers-by and enjoying himself while he was at it. He began to understand the joy of being a madman, and was even starting to be pleased with the hanged ghost makeup, not wanting to wash it off. It's not like there's water around anyway, so I'll let it be. He fixed his hair and glanced at his wrist. There was no indication the cuts were fading or healing at all, which meant that the trifling revenge of venting anger on Mo Xuanyu's behalf was far from enough. Did he really have to slaughter the entire Mo family? To be honest, that wouldn't have been anything difficult to do. Wei Wuxian pondered this as he sauntered back to the Mo manor. As he snuck past the west courtyard with small, quick steps, he noticed the Lan disciples on top of the rooftops and the wall eaves, gathered in somber discussion. He snuck back again with those small, quick steps and looked up, watching them intently. While the Lan clan of Gusu was a major part of the coalition that had come to besiege him in the past, those juniors hadn't yet been born at the time, or if they had, would have been only a few years old. So that event had nothing to do with them. Wei Wuxian stood there and observed, wanting to see how they planned on handling the situation. As he looked on, he suddenly felt something amiss. Why did those black flags being flown on the rooftops and wall eaves look so familiar? The flag was called a spirit attraction flag. If it was stuck on a living person, then it would attract every dark spirit, every vengeful ghost, every fierce corpse, and all such manner of evil to attack said person. Since wearing a flag was akin to becoming a live target, the flag was also called a target flag. It could be stuck on buildings, but said building had to have all living persons within, and the range of the target would increase to include all people within the building. Since yin energy swirled around the area where these flags were planted like a black whirlwind, they were also known as black wind flags. These youths were setting up the flag formation and had told others not to go near, so they had to intend to lure the walking corpses here to capture them all at once. As for why the flags looked familiar, how could they not? The creator of the spirit attraction flag was this very Yiling patriarch. It appeared that despite how the cultivation world had demanded Wei Wuxian's demise, they nevertheless had no qualms about making use of his inventions. One of the disciples on the rooftops noticed him watching and chided him. "Go back. This is not a place you should be." Although he was being ordered to shoo, it was done with good intentions, and the tone of the voice employed was also greatly different from that of the Mo servants. While the youth was off his guard, Wei Wuxian hopped up and plucked a flag. Greatly alarmed, the disciple jumped down the wall to chase after him. "Don't touch that, it's not for you." Wei Wuxian hollered as he ran, looking completely like a lunatic, his hair flying loose and disheveled, arms waving and legs skipping. "Finders keepers, I want this, mine." The disciple quickly caught up with him and grabbed his arm. "Give it back, or else I'll hit you." Wei Wuxian clutched the flag tightly, refusing to let go. The leader of the group that was setting up the flag formation was alerted by the commotion and also came fluttering down from the eaves. "Jingyi, let it go. Retrieve the flag nicely. There is no need to start a dispute." "Shizui, I didn't hit him for real," Lan Jingyi complained. "Look at him. He's messed up the flag formation." During their push and pull, Wei Wuxian had swiftly finished inspecting the spirit attraction flag. The drawn patterns were correct, and none of the spells were missing either. There were no mistakes, so no mishaps would occur if the flags were used. The only issue was that the person who'd drawn the flag was not very experienced, so the spell could only attract any evil and walking corpses within a 2.5 radius at most. But that would be enough. Lan Xizhui turned to him with a smile. "Mo Gongzhe, it's getting late, and we'll be starting to catch walking corpses here soon. It is dangerous at night. You'd best hurry back to your chambers." Wei Wuxian sized up this youth. The boy was gentle in disposition, refined and elegant, noble in his bearing, with a light grin curving the corners of his lips. This was a good sprout, very worthy of encouragement, and Wei Wuxian mentally gave him a nod of approval. The child had set up the flag formation in a proper and orderly manner, and his upbringing really was quite commendable as well. Wei Wuxian wondered who among that terrifying group of uptight sticks in the mud known as the Lan Clan had managed to raise such a junior. Lan Shizui added, "This flag," before he could finish, Wei Wuxian tossed the spirit attraction flag onto the ground and humphed. "What's so good about this crappy flag? I can draw better." Then he took off right after. The juniors who were on the rooftop watching the show burst out laughing at his shameful declaration so riotously that they almost fell off the roof. Lan Jingyi also laughed in exasperation, then picked up the flag on the ground, dusting it off. "What a lunatic!" "Don't say that," Lan Shizui chided him. "Let's go back and help now." As for Wei Wuxian, he wandered idly about for a while. It wasn't until after dark that he returned to Mo Xuanyu's little courtyard. The door latch was snapped without anyone to clean up the mess. He ignored it and picked a somewhat clean spot in the room before sitting down and continuing to meditate. Yet, unexpectedly, it hadn't reached the morning hours when a noisy commotion outside pulled him out of his meditative state. A clamor of footsteps mixed with wailing and screaming was rapidly approaching, and Wei Wuxian heard these cries repeated. "Break in and drag him out! Report him to the authorities! Who cares about the authorities? Just beat him to death!" He opened his eyes just as a number of servants charged in. The entire courtyard was lit up as bright as day, and someone was shouting, "Drag that murdering lunatic to the main hall and make him pay with his life!" Wei Wuxian's first thought was, did something go wrong with those youths' flag formation? The smallest carelessness in the usage of his inventions could cause disaster, which was why he had earlier purposely gone to verify whether the spirit attraction flag was properly drawn. Thus, when those large hands came to drag him out the door, Wei Wuxian lay there limply, allowing himself to be dragged out. It saved him the trouble anyway. He was dragged to the East Hall, where it was as lively as could be. Surprisingly, there were no fewer townspeople gathered than there had been during the day. Many of the servants and close family relations had come, some still dressed in inner robes, not having had time to coif their hair, panic painted on each of their faces. Lady Mo sat slumped in her seat, as if she had only just awoken from having fainted. There were traces of tears on the sides of her cheeks, the rims of her eyes still wet. However, the moment Wei Wuxian was dragged in, her tears instantly transformed into a baleful glare. On the ground, there lay something that resembled the form of a human. The body was covered by a white sheet, and only its head was exposed. Lan Shizui and those youths were bent down, inspecting the body solemnly and whispering to each other. Their words filtered into Wei Wuxian's ears. "It hasn't been one incense time since he was discovered. Right after subduing the walking corpses, we were rushing to the east courtyard, and the dead body was lying there in the corridor." The body was Mo Ziyuan. Wei Wuxian swept a glance over him, then took another look in spite of himself. The corpse looked like Mo Ziyuan, but at the same time not. While the facial features were clearly that of his cheap little cousin, the cheeks were deeply sunken, his eyeballs bulging, and the skin wrinkled. It was as if he had aged 20 years compared to the previous Mo Ziyuan, who had been in the prime of his youth. It also almost seemed as if he had been sucked dry of his blood and flesh. He looked like a mere sack of bones, dressed in an extremely thin veil of skin. If it could have been said that the Mo Ziyuan from before was simply ugly, then this corpse was now old and ugly. Wei Wuxian was just taking a detailed look when Madame Mo suddenly came charging over. Something shining flashed in her hand. She was holding a dagger. Moving as fast as his eyes saw, Lan Shizui knocked it out of her hand, but before he could say anything, Madame Mo was already screaming at him. "My son died a tragic death. I need to avenge him. What are you stopping me for?" Wei Wuxian once again ducked behind Lan Shizui and shot back. "What does your son's tragic death have to do with me?" Lan Shizui had watched Wei Wuxian make a scene during the day, then later heard plenty of exaggerated rumors about this illegitimate son from the others. He felt great pity for this mentally ill person and couldn't help but try to speak up for the man. "Madame Mo, the state of your son's corpse is clearly the work of evil. Its blood, flesh, and spirit have been completely sucked out. He could not be the culprit." Madame Mo's chest heaved. "What do you know? This lunatic's father is a cultivator, so he must have learned plenty of evil magic." Lan Shizui looked back and took a glance at the seemingly half-witted Wei Wuxian. "Madam, there is no evidence, so it is still best." "The evidence is on my son's body!" Madame Mo pointed at the corpse on the ground. "Take a look yourselves. Yuan's dead body has already told me who his murderer is." Without waiting for the others to make a move, Wei Wuxian raced to pull back the sheet from head to toe. Mo Ziyuan's corpse had something missing. His left arm, from the shoulder down, had vanished, as if it had sprouted wings. Madame Mo added, "You see that? You all heard him today, right? What this lunatic said, that if Yuan touched his things again, he would chop off Yuan's arms." After her hysterics had settled, she covered her face and sobbed. "My poor Yuan never touched anything of this lunatic's. Not only was he slandered, he was killed by this maniac." Maniac? It was so endearing. How many years had it been since he'd heard himself described as such? Wei Wuxian pointed at himself, but he didn't have the words to rebuke that particular statement. He didn't know, either, whether he really was mental, or if Madame Mo was the one who was ill. After all, he had boasted about slaughtering entire sects, laying waste to millions, making blood flow like rivers, and other such things when he was younger. But that was all talk most of the time. If he really could do all that, he would have tyrannized the world already. Madame Mo wasn't trying to avenge her son at all. She was only looking for someone to vent her anger on. Wei Wuxian didn't want to bother with her. After a moment of thought, he reached into Mo Ziyuan's robes and searched, finally digging something out. When he unfolded that something, it was a spirit attraction flag. In an instant, it dawned on him. He muttered under his breath, "Mo Ziyuan brought this on himself." When Lan Shishui and the others saw the item taken out of Mo Ziyuan's ribs, oh my god, I keep saying ribs instead of robes. When Lan Shishui and the others, actually, let's find out how to say it. How to pronounce Shishui. Lan Shishui. Okay, how to pronounce MDZS names. We're gonna skip to girl. She's going over the names of the swords. Oh, here we go. Okay.
锥，蓝氏锥，
Lan Sijue.
蓝氏锥，
Lan Sijue. I'm so sorry. When Lan Sijue and the others saw the item taken out of Mo Ziyuan's robes, they also understood what had happened. Thinking back to the farce that had taken place during the day, it wasn't hard to deduce what had transpired. Earlier, Mo Ziyuan had lost considerable face due to Mo Xuanyu's hysterics, filling him with hatred. He'd had a mind to settle scores, but Mo Xuanyu had gone out frolicking, nowhere to be found. So Mo Ziyuan intended to wait until nighttime to teach Mo Xuanyu an underhanded lesson. Yet, when night came and he snuck out the door, as he passed by the west courtyard, he saw the spirit attraction flags planted atop the wall eaves. While there were strict instructions against outings at night, and that the west courtyard was forbidden and that those black flags were not to be touched under any circumstances, Mo Ziyuan thought that was the cultivators purposely scaring people off because they were afraid of others stealing their precious spiritual weapons. He was unaware of just how dangerous and ominous the effects of the spirit attraction flag were, and that once held, a flag would make the bearer a living target. Mo Ziyuan's hands had never been clean. He'd grown addicted to stealing the talismans and spiritual tools belonging to his crazy older cousin. When he saw the magical objects, he couldn't help but feel the itch to take them for himself, no matter the cost. Thus, while the owners of the flags were subduing walking corpses in the west courtyard, he secretly plucked one away. The flag formation utilized 6 spirit attraction flags, 5 of which were set up in the west courtyard using those youths from the Lan family as bait. However, they themselves were protected by the countless spiritual tools carried on their persons. Although Mo Ziyuan had only stolen the one flag, he didn't have any protective tools on him. Go after the weakest, as they say. Naturally, the evil spirits were lured to him. If it had only been walking corpses, then it wouldn't have been a big deal. At most, he'd have been bitten a couple times. It wouldn't have resulted in his death. There would still have been a chance to save him, yet it just so happened that the spirit attraction flag had unintentionally summoned something more terrifying than walking corpses, and it was precisely this unknown evil spirit that had killed Mo Ziyuan and robbed him of an arm. Wei Wuxian raised his wrist. Sure enough, a cut on his left arm had healed. It seemed the sacrificial ritual had acknowledged Mo Ziyuan's death as his doing. After all, the spirit attraction flag was Wei Wuxian's invention, so he'd hit the mark out of pure luck. Madame Mo was perfectly aware of her son's little flaws, but she would never admit Mo Ziyuan had caused his own death. Anxious and aggravated, she picked up a teacup and hurled it at Wei Wuxian's face. If you hadn't made a scene and framed him in front of so many people yesterday, would he have gone out in the middle of the night? It's all your fault, you bastard. Wei Wuxian was already prepared and sidestepped to dodge the attack. Madame Mo then screamed at Lan Shizhui. Lan Sijui. And you bunch of useless fools, what cultivators are you? What evil can you exercise? You can't even protect a child. Yuan is so young. Those youths were still green and only had so much experience under their belt. They hadn't detected anything unusual in this area, which is why they'd never thought there'd be such a ferocious evil. At first, they'd been quite sorry because they felt themselves lacking, but after Madame Mo's indiscriminate tongue-lashing, they were growing upset. After all, they came from a distinguished clan. No one had ever dared to treat them this way. The teachings of the Lan clan of Gusu were extremely strict. They forbade raising a hand against normal folk. Not even rudeness was allowed. Even though they were irritated, they had to force it down, causing dark expressions to cloud their faces. Wei Wuxian couldn't take it anymore. He thought, after so many years, the Lan family still acts this way. What's the use of all that self-restraint unless you're looking to suffocate yourselves? Watch me. He spat loudly. Who do you think you're yelling at? Do you really take them to be your servants? They came all this way to exercise evil for free, and now they owe you. How old is your son again? At least 17, right? A child still? How old do you have to be to understand human words? Did they not instruct us again and again yesterday not to go near the west courtyard, not to touch anything in the fountain, in the formation? The fountain. Your son snuck out in the middle of the night to dally about. Is that my fault, or is it his fault? Lan Jingyi and the others let out a breath, no longer looking as upset. Madame Mo was both extremely sad and resentful, and her mind was filled with nothing but thoughts of death. More specifically, it wasn't thoughts of herself dying to accompany her son, but rather thoughts of having everyone in this world die, especially the ones currently in front of her. Whenever something happened, she'd always order her husband around, so she shoved him. Call everyone in here. However, her husband was in a daze. Perhaps the shock of the death of his only son was too great, but he shoved her back, knocked down to the ground so abruptly, Madame Mo was stunned. If it had been before, Madame Mo needn't have pushed him. As long as she raised her voice a tiny bit, he'd do whatever she said. Yet today, he dared fight back. The servants were all terrified by her expression, and a trembling Ading helped her stand. Ading? Is it Ading, not Ading? Maybe it's Ading. We'll find that out. I'll get back to you. Helped her stand. Madame Mo grabbed her heart and said with a shaking voice, You get lost too. Her husband seemed not to have heard. Ading shot Atong a number of looks. Atong quickly dragged his master out. It was chaos within the East Shell. Seeing how the family was quieting down, Wei Wuxian went to inspect the corpse further. However, he had barely glanced at it before another high-pitched scream pierced through the door. The crowd inside the hall poured out and were greeted with the sight of two bodies spasming on the ground in the east courtyard. One was a slumped, One was a slumped Atong, alive. The other was collapsed on the ground, its body wrinkled and withered, as if its blood and flesh had been completely sucked dry. Its left arm was already gone, and there was no blood flowing from the wound. The state of this corpse was exactly the same as Mo Ziyuan's. Madame Mo had just shaken off Ading's supporting hand, but when she saw that corpse lying on the ground, she was stunned in place. At last, exhausted of the energy to throw more fits, she fainted. Wei Wuxian happened to be standing near her, so he caught her and passed her to A Ding as she came running over. Then he took a glance at his right hand. A cut there was gone as well. Madame Mo's husband had only stepped out onto the threshold of the hall. He hadn't even entered the yard before he died tragically on the spot. Everything had happened within an instant. Lan Shizhui, Lan Jingyi, and the others paled. But Lan Shizhui was the first to compose himself. He questioned the slumped A Tong. Did you see what it was? A Tong was thoroughly horrified. His teeth clenched so hard that he couldn't utter a word for the moment, only shaking his head. Lan Shizhui, burning with impatience, instructed his peers to bring the boy inside before he turned to Lan Jingyi. Did you fire the signal? I did, Lan Jingyi replied. Oh, it thinks that I'm a bot, so I have to okay. I think I wonder when let's see when this chapter ends. Kind of soon. No, I think we're gonna end here because my back hurts. And I'm going to upload this to YouTube. Yeah, we got 42 pages in, and I feel like that's pretty good. And we will pick up whenever I feel like doing this again. I hope you enjoyed it. I will figure out the pronunciation later.